Welcome to SORMAG's Writers Cafe, where we share the real writer's life over a cup of friendship, sprinkled with laughter and wisdom. My name is LaShaunda Hoffman, and I'm your host. This episode's sponsor is Tickle My Tummy by Ann Clay. Sitting at the cafe today is Roe Braddy, Natasha Frazier. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Thank you.
All right, so we're just going to jump right on in and get some introductions going. Each author will share a little bit of who they are, what they write, what their current book is, and we will start with Roe.
Hello. My name is Roe Braddy. I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Originally, I'm from Pittsburgh, but I guess after 30 years of living in Harrisburg, I might as well say I'm a Harrisburgian, I guess. I am a retired school teacher. I taught English, math, and special education. I've been retired now probably for about 8.5 years. I started writing after I retired. My first book was a novella. It was actually a book about teaching. I wrote that book, must have been about 7 years ago. After that, I really wanted to write children's books for children living with disabilities, because after I did a lot of research, I realized it was a genre that nobody really investigated. There were not a lot of books written for children living with disabilities, and particularly children of color living with disabilities. So I have two children's books. One's called The Box of Red Marbles, and the other one is called The Royal Storyteller. I actually did a second edition of that one where I combined the two stories. So if you look on my Amazon author page, you'll see The Box of Red Marbles with The Royal Storyteller. So it's two stories in one. After I did that, I wrote a play. Actually, I've written and produced 3 plays for community theater here in Harrisburg. But the first play I did was called The Warm Heart of Steel. And after I did the play, I adapted the play into a book. And I was writing the book and performing the play at the same time, so I was a bit on the busy side. The book was actually published last year. It is, I would say the genre would be women's fiction or Christian fiction. So, and it's a story, I say the story is very near and dear to my heart because bits and pieces of it are from childhood memories. It's really the story that my parents told me about living through the civil rights movement in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the Hill District. Right after Dr. King was killed, there was just a siege in a variety of different cities. There were several cities where riots broke out, and a lot of the inner city areas were burnt. In this particular case, they lived in the Hill District, and when these riots broke out, there was a lot of things that were happening at that time, and African Americans were really in an uproar about the death of Dr. King. And my parents would tell me these stories about what it was like to live in that time, and they were part of the Great Migration. They were from the South, and they came to the North looking for better jobs and getting away from Jim Crow laws. And my father would tell me these amazing stories, and so would my mother. So, when you're a child, you don't necessarily think that your parents are telling you stories that become part of history. But as I got older, I realized that these stories were really part of history. So I started just remembering what they told me, and then eventually I wrote this book, A Warm Heart of Steel.
Are you going to read an excerpt?
Oh, sure. I didn't know if you wanted me to do that now or sure. I'll read you the very beginning. I'll read you 2 pages. The very beginning, and the characters in the book are actually named after my parents. My father's name was Matthias, and my mother's name was Inez, but my father always called her Nezzy. So in the book, her name is Nezzy. And they actually met in a little bar and grill, and actually it was a mega for a lot of the jazz greats that got their start in the Hill District. And I called it the Copper Pipe, but it was really called the Crawford. So if you look up the Crawford in Pittsburgh, you'll find out it was really a very famous place. So that's what I'm talking about is the Copper Pipe. It was 1968. Miles Davis was the headliner on the night they met. Matthias noticed Nezzy the minute she came over to the bar to pick up her order. He sat at the bar wearing his heavy blue work shirt and steel-toed boots, not exactly appropriate attire for the Copper Pipe lounge. Mike, the bartender, noticed the server standing there, turned and asked, "Hey, Nezzy, what you need?" She glanced over to where Matthias was sitting. He was quietly tapping his fingers on the bar to the music that was playing in the background. He said, "Hi." She hesitated, giving him a once-over, then said, "Hi. Excuse me, Mike. I need rum and coke and a gin and tonic." "Okay, give me a minute." In a few minutes, her drinks were ready. As she picked them up from the bar, she turned and gave Matthias another glance. She thought to herself, handsome guy. Too bad he knows nothing about dressing for a club, but at least he's working. Nezzy seductively glided back to the waiting customers. Mesmerized, Matthias followed her with his eyes. She was a slender woman with high cheekbones and the skin the color of coffee with a hint of cream. She wore her hair in a wave set with a gardenia tucked behind her left ear, and her black uniform smoothly fit every curve of her body. As she rounded the table and bent down to deliver the final drink, Matthias quickly glanced at a hint of cleavage. Catching his breath, he silently asked the Lord for forgiveness for where his mind had begun to travel, but his eyes never left her as she moved from table to table. I'll read one more page. There was another couple, Mavis and Ed, and they actually were friends of my parents, and they didn't live too far from us, but their lives were a lot different. They had a lot of kids. I had an older brother, but this particular family ended up having 11 children, and I sort of patterned this couple off of them. I'll just read a little bit of that. Mavis brought him the comfort that he had been seeking. She was warm and nurturing, a healing thaw to both scars on the outside as well as the scars on the inside, at least most of them. When Ed arrived home, he found Mavis in the kitchen making her famous neck bones and white potatoes. The aroma had put a spell on Ed before he could open the door. Mavis was quite the cook. She could take scraps and turn them into mouth-watering meals fit for a king. As he opened the door, Mavis stood greeting him, singing the words to her favorite Lena Horne song. Ed took one glance at his wife and knew from the look in her eye that she had her mind set on a night out on the town. "Mavis, girl, I'm dog-tired. I don't know what you're about to ask me." Ed maneuvered his way into the apartment and sat his lunchbox down on the little red enamel table, pulled up a chair, and plopped himself squarely into it. Mavis sat down on Ed's lap, tenderly rubbing the back of her hand over the scar that ran from his ear down to the side of his face. Ed nestled his head on his wife's ample breast, taking in her scent of lilacs and Duz detergent. That scent would simply stupefy him every time. The feel of her soft, warm body pressed against him made him feel safe, but weak and willing to give her anything she wanted. But he had to do his best to avoid going to the Copper Pipe. His desire to please her could be his undoing. Several weeks ago, they had gone to hear Mary Lou Williams. Yes, the music had been great, but was it worth the risk? The Copper Pipe was dark and smoky. Ed had managed to stay clear of the lighted bar area where the waitresses picked up their orders, but how long could that last? The new barmaid, Nezzy, would eventually notice that a part of her past had followed her and was sitting right under her nose. Somehow he would have to find the strength to avoid the situation again without giving Mavis cause for any worry. She slowly began to unbutton his work shirt, kissing the tufts of hair on his chest. He could feel the heat from his body quickly rise and his will softly dissolve. Lost in the moment, Ed breathed deeply, knowing that it was a lost cause. Please, Ed, she gonna sing Love Me or Leave Me. All right, Mavis, you win, but you're gonna pay. I ain't that tired. They both began to breathe heavily, knowing what would come next. He stood up, raising Mavis in his arms as though she weighed nothing more than a 10-pound sack of potatoes, softly singing Love Me or Leave Me in her ear as he slowly carried her into the bedroom. Their lovemaking was strong and filled with the passion that they both felt for one another. Mavis would tell Ed that he was her big, handsome man. When she spoke those words, Ed would feel flawless, as though he could conquer the world. After dinner, Mavis sat at her dressing table, adding the final touches to her hair, which was done in a soft wave set. She turned to look at Ed as he stood staring at her in the mirror while tightening the knot on his blue and yellow striped tie. Girl, you looking good. You ain't changed a bit since the day I laid eyes on you. The finest filly in Pittsburgh, and you all mine. Mavis laughed, shaking her head. Yes, baby, I remember the day you walked into the Five and Dime. I thought you was a lot rough around the edges, but I guess you pretty smooth out right now. They laughed. They both laughed. Ed's laugh came more out of nervousness about the rest of the evening might have in store, as he couldn't stay hidden in the shadows. After all, time had put distance between him and Nezzy and that terrible night. Ed would need to do his best to make the evening as uneventful as possible. So there's a little mystery going on in the story, too. So there's mystery. There's the love story, and there is a little mayhem.
All right. Thank you. What, I see you write different genres, too. What is your favorite genre to write?
I like I said, I've written children's books. I've also written a teacher's guide. So I find myself more a fictional writer. You know, I love Christian, even though I'm talking about the first chapters is talking about the character being in a bar and a grill. It doesn't get any racier than what I read. I really do love the romantic, clean women's fiction, Christian fiction. I love the creativity of being able to develop the characters and live with them. And this, like I said, A Warm Heart of Steel for me was so close because I was writing about, you know, putting bits and pieces of the stories that my mother and my father told me. So
I like that to live with them. I like that.
What'd you say?
I say I like that you said you live with your characters. I like that.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I'm in the process of writing, like I said, a short, and the characters from this book are going to be part of the short.
Okay. Natasha, you ready?
Yes, ma'am. I am Natasha Frazier. I write Christian fiction, romance, and devotionals. I started writing in 2012, and before I started writing, I had this internal battle going on for quite some time about, you know, should I or shouldn't I? And my very first book was The Life Your Spirit Craves. It's a 30-day devotional and journal. And that book is for anybody who may have that should I or shouldn't I thing going on with whatever it is that God has impressed upon their heart to do. Because I had tons of excuses of why I shouldn't write, especially because I was getting ready to write a devotional. I had issues with whether or not I should be writing because, you know, felt like, oh, I'm not a pastor, I don't have a pulpit platform, all these different things. Is God really leading me to do this? And one of the things that I've learned through life and throughout my writing career is that when God is impressing something upon your heart, like, it won't go away. It'll always be there. And for me, the more I talk about my story, I can see it as far back as my first year in college, which would put me about 10 years before I published my first book. So, before I even go on a little bit more about myself, I just want to encourage anybody who's listening, if you feel like God is leading you to do something, to pray about it. When I got ready to write the first book, one of the last times I prayed about it, I opened my Bible and started reading Joshua 18:3. And it says, how long are you going to wait before you take possession of the land the Lord your God has already given to you? And, of course, that scripture reference is about the tribes of Israel who had not yet taken possession of the land that God had given them. They're waiting like, hey, God, you said you're going to give this to us. When are you going to give it to us? And God said, hey, I've already given it to you. You just got to go and possess it. And so that just reminded me of my own procrastination at that time, that God had already given me everything I needed, had already put people in my path to help me. I just needed to take a step of faith to start writing. Because, when you're writing, you're putting yourself out there. You don't know how people are going to receive it. You don't know, how things are going to go. So it's a certain level of vulnerability. And so after the first book, I wrote a 1-year devotional after that, and then I started writing fiction. So I have a mix of fiction and devotionals. My fiction series is Love, Lives, and Consequences. It's a 4-book series. And it starts about a young woman who has taken a vow of celibacy, but she meets this guy, and he basically challenges everything she thought she knew about herself and her and this vow that she made. And so she makes a lot of choices that are totally against everything she said she was going to do. And as initially that book was going to be a 2-book series, but as the story went on, it became 4 books, because I constantly asked the question, well, what if this happens? And I really enjoyed writing that series. That was my first series. And in hindsight, if you read the series and you see how it ends, it turns out that, it's not really about the main character that I started with at all. It's about someone else. It's just amazing how that series evolved into something more than I could have even imagined it to be. And so the second series, it's turning into a series now. Kairos, The Perfect Time for Love. So that's going to be the Perfect Time for Love series. I'm getting ready to release a book next month for the second book in that series next month. So I'm really excited about that. I love love. When I first started reading consistently, I was in high school. My mom would buy the Arabesque romance books from Walmart at that time, and she would never read them. They'd just be lying around the house. And one day I asked her, well, can I read it? And I read it and just fell in love with the romance stories. And so just at heart, I'm just a romantic at heart, so I love writing romance stories. So that is where I'm headed. My most recent book is Pursuit. It is a Bible study, a 9-session Bible study. And it just focuses on the fact that throughout everything that happens in our lives, we can see God in pursuit of our hearts. Every situation, big or small, if we just kind of take a step back, we can see God's hand at work in our lives the entire time. And so what I did with this book is I took the stories of Moses, of David, Gideon, Saul, who was later called Paul, and a few others, and we just talk about their journeys and just pulling out those situations where we can see well, God clearly pursued them. And, you know, what I want the readers to get out of this study is to just see how God is pursuing our hearts every day, and especially in the environment that we're living in right now. I know I've constantly asked the question, you know, what is it that God wants me to learn through all of this? What is it he wants me to know? And I believe the answer is clear, and it's for all of us, and that's that he still loves us no matter what's happening. And so I am going to read an excerpt for you. And the very first person we study is Moses, and so I'll read a little bit of that. And so this is a Bible study that can be done with a group or alone because there are study questions throughout the chapters for you to answer. And at the end of every chapter, there are additional questions, and some of them have fill-ins where you have to go and study, find a scripture, fill in a blank, and to see how God is speaking to you through that scripture. We'll be reading Exodus 2 and 3, and the meditational thought is, what can I learn about God's pursuit of me through Moses' story? Moses was set apart at birth. When Pharaoh put out an order to throw all the Israelite baby boys in the Nile River, Moses was saved by Pharaoh's daughter and his sister. That's in Exodus 2, verse 5. Years later, he fled to Midian after killing an Egyptian who was beating up an Israelite. While in Midian, he married Zipporah and started a family. Now here is Moses out living his life, tending his father-in-law's flock, when he has a God encounter, the burning bush. That's Exodus 3, verse 2. God appeared to Moses in the form of a bush that was engulfed in blazing fire, yet it wasn't burning up. Of course, Moses, like most of us would probably have been, was curious. He had to get closer to see what was happening. Why isn't the bush burning? When Moses walked closer to the bush, God began speaking to him, calling him by name. One thing that amazes me is the confirmation that God knows each of us by name, just as he did Moses. He called Moses out to give him an assignment. In the midst of Moses living an ordinary life, 40 years after he fled Egypt, God pursued him. This lets us know that Moses from birth was set apart for God's purpose, as each of us is. We may not be called to lead a nation of people out of Egypt, but there are people within our sphere of influence who need to know God in a more intimate way. And so one of the first questions, which is really a question of self-reflection, is who in your life needs to know Christ?
Thank you. That was good. You kind of stepped a lot on my toes over here. I deal with procrastination a lot and those internal fears. I wanted to discuss that a little bit. I wanted to see if Roe had those issues with internal fears.
Oh, most definitely. I think about now, like I said, I had gone to the RSJ conference in July, and I came away, I don't know, I think I was emotionally torn because I had the opportunity to pitch to several traditional publishing houses. The story that I pitched is the one that I just finished. It said the editors. So I'm still at that point now where do I continue to self-publish or do I start to, again, because I've done that before, put myself out, just like you said, you're putting yourself in a place of vulnerability for rejection. And I think, as a writer, we're all there. It's like, everybody is not going to like everything we write. So there is that internal fear of, okay, I'm going to submit this book, and I may or may not get picked up. But then the thing about it is to continue despite your fear. It's to keep going anyway. It's that expression of, okay, I'm afraid, do it afraid. So I think we do all have that eternal fear of rejection, or is my writing good enough to go to the next level?
Yes, I think that's the hardest part about being a writer is I thought once you put it out there, the fear would go away, but I think it gets worse each time. You know, and I've talked to so many authors over the years, and I've met some who are fearless. This doesn't scare me at all. And then I've met some who were like on my level. They understood. They procrastinate. They sit on the couch. They binge watch all kinds of stuff. That's been me. I binge watch everything that can be binge watched when I should be writing. you know.
Oh, I write every day. Usually now that after I retired, I was subbing pretty much. I was subbing a lot to write, and now with COVID, my husband has a lot of pre-existing health conditions, so he doesn't want me to sub. So I'm home all day. So I literally write 8 to 12 hours a day.
Wow.
So that's really been the blessing of being able to really be a full-time writer and just write. But there's still that, okay, I've written this book. Do I just stay with what I'm doing now, being a self-publisher, or, what's the chances of it getting picked up, despite the fact I know that they liked it. So I'm still in that little bit of a worry,
Yeah, I think you stay in that position a lot because a lot of stuff is opening up when it used to be kind of closed off. So you have different options now. When I started, everybody was going to the big publishers. And so I had got a couple of rejections, and that kind of chipped at my ego. So I was like, hey, forget it. But I've learned that this is a slow journey sometimes for people. Some people have a fast publication. Some people have. Mine has been a 20-plus journey of I was Joshua and them waiting on it to happen. and God was like, I already told you what to do. You just ain't doing what you're supposed to do, And so that when you were saying it, I was like, oh my goodness, that was me because I didn't. And it's still me because that's how come I'm still working on this one book forever, And I'm like, you just gotta let go and let God. And sometimes it's just so hard because you get it. For me, I get in my own way. Last week I took a week off and I decided I was going to write 8 hours a day. I probably wrote maybe six at the most. That was the most because my focus just kept going to other things. So I'm like, you can't do this, But it was a good experience because it showed me I can do it, but that you have to stay focused, and that's the thing. And I've learned that over the years with writing, is you have to stay focused to complete the manuscript. Then you have to stay focused to introduce it to readers, and then you have to stay focused to start the journey all over again. And I think a lot of people come into this writing business thinking, oh, it's easy. You can write a book. I see all the time. You can write a book in a weekend. Yeah, you can. But it's so much more to go with it. You got to get it edited. Then you got to get your covers, and then you got to get it out there to the readers. Then you got to push that. And all they thinking about is I wrote a book in 14 days. And they're not thinking about all the stuff that goes with writing. And I think people do people a disservice when they tell them that they can write a book so quickly because there's so much behind that book that you have to know. You have to know it. You have to study it. You have to learn it. And they put that book out there, and then they're devastated because it's not hitting the way they thought it was going to hit. And that's because you still, yes, you went the fast path, but it's still steps you have to go through at the end,
Writing is actually the easiest part.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
everything
It
else
is.
that comes after it.
Yeah, the business part of the writing is the hardest, and that's the part that a lot of people want to skip. They want to skip it if they're self-published. They want to skip if they're published with a big publisher. And you can't if you're going to be in this as a business. You can't skip the business part, and you can't hand it over to somebody because then you're worried. You're wondering what, I hear people all saying, well, I know I sold 20 books, and they haven't told me anything. And how do you know? What are you getting to prove that you sold books? If you're not getting a royalty statement from, self-publishing or from the big publisher, you don't know what you're doing. You just on Amazon looking at your numbers, and that can drive you crazy too.
Oh
Yeah. And that autonomy to me means everything.
Mhm. It's interesting. I'm glad you shared that, Natasha, about your internal fears, because a lot of people don't talk about that. And I know for myself, my fears have stopped me from being published for years because, I had 50 million questions all the time about my books, or who's going to, at that time I was trying to find a publisher, who's going to publish me, and I kept getting into markets that nobody was buying. So it was a horrible experience, but
what was our market?
Yeah. I want to know, how are you guys reaching new readers during this COVID season?
I started a book club, and I'm not necessarily looking for it to be this huge book club, but what it did was it gave me constant content. Right now we have about 8 or 9 members. We meet the first Thursday of every month. We talk about particularly Black literature, and the focus is on emerging authors, and here in Harrisburg, local authors. I'm also a part of the Writer's Workshop, and it's a forum where we get together, and we do more poetry than fiction, but it's a place where, you can come and there's other writers and you can read your work, and you get that feeling that you're supported. So I try to join as many things that I can that I know that are going to support me, but then I also try to find ways that I can have, the content while I'm writing. Because, if you're writing something, you don't necessarily have something new all the time. So it's like, how do you stay relevant? And I think social media can be either a beauty or a beast. There's so much out there, and sometimes you can soak up a whole day in social media. So what I try to do is I try to pick 1 or 2 days that I'm going to post or I'm going to do a video. But when I do that, I don't look at anybody else's post, because I know I just need to do what I'm going to do with social media, get my stuff on there, and get off and get back to the writing. So I think that's, for me, it's the biggest thing, is to always have some constant content.
Okay. I like that you are doing a book club. I thought when you said that earlier off the line that you were doing a book club about your books, but I like that you're doing it about different other books, because that introduces you to new people, and it doesn't just get bogged down about me. So that's good. I like that.
Yeah, and I think it lets other people know that, you're, even though you want them to buy your writing, you're not always pushing your stuff in their face.
Yeah, that's good, and you're meeting new people. As if you don't have a limit on your book club, then everyone is welcome. So that's great.
Yeah.
As me, I'm a social media girl, but I use social media for engagement. So I will say that pick a day where you can go back on and engage with people, because you don't want to be that person that only posts. You want to be a person who responds, and that's the engagement. Social media is about engagement. You can use it as a billboard, but if you're not engaging with people, social media, the way they have the algorithms, they're not going to show your stuff. They're like, oh, she only come on here to post stuff. We ain't not showing it to nobody. And you can look at your analytics and see. And it'll show you, especially if you got a page, it'll show you 2 people saw it. You're like, what?
Yeah. I do go back. I should say I do go back and respond. Usually what I do is I pick those 2 days that I'm going to go back. Like if I post something, I'll go back later that day, and I might respond, but it'll be that one day. Like if I post. Okay,
good. That's what I'm just saying. Make sure you're making time to respond.
Yeah, no, I do.
You become that drive-by promoter.
No.
And then people tune you out. Yeah, people tune you out. I post a question every day on my social media, and sometimes I'll come on like 2 or 3 times a day and respond to stuff. I posted it about dating the other day, and somebody's like, why would you ask that question? And so I put down, I want to know. Get off my page. But that's you never know when you put what you're going to get when you put it out there on social media. And I got some really great response. I told you I was doing the 4-book series, and the question had to do with the series, and I just wanted to know, because sometimes you want to know if stuff is relevant. Would you ask the questions? People say that all the time when they're reading books. I don't think that was realistic. And I'm like, it's a book. But some people want it to be realistic, so
I was doing a daily post about my walks in the summertime, especially on Thursdays, because in our development, Thursdays was trash day. So I would just be going for a walk, and, people said their trash out on the curb in front of their house, and you would find these most unusual things. So I started blogging, Facebook blogging about what I saw, and I would get, people who were saying, I can't wait, it's Wednesday. So I would tune in on Wednesday, and I would say, well, tomorrow's Thursday, it's trash day, I'll let you know what I find. And then later on Thursday, I would put out a post, and I'd have a picture, like there was one time they had an old piano, an upright piano, and it had been sitting there for like 2 weeks, so the wood started to buckle. And I wrote this blog about Old Faithful. I can't exactly remember, but I got so much feedback on this blog post. Posts like that, I continuously stay on them because I think, people are really interested in it. And sometimes you can find something that really grabs somebody's attention, and you do get to a point. But I try not to go and look at everybody's blog or Facebook post, because then it does suck up my whole day.
Oh yeah, Facebook, you can get drowned and to come out. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm just gonna do 15 minutes. I tell myself 15 minutes, and then I look up, it's 2 hours past. I'm like, wow.
So I'll respond back, and then I'm like, gotta go.
Yeah.
There have been times where I've gone on there to post and forgot what I was going to post because I got sucked in. An hour later, and I haven't even done what I was supposed to do.
But I'm at the show called Lovecraft Country, and I joined the group for that. And man, these people, it's over 10,000 people in the group, so the comments are usually 200 comments or more. And the topics that they have in there, one person took the story and turned it into the Bible. I was like, what? You're getting really deep, but he had so many comments that I'm trying to read the comments, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been on here for 20 minutes reading these comments. Let me go. I'm like, I gotta go. But people just like to talk, and so if you can get them a subject they want to talk about, we can talk. I started talking about grief in 2011 when my mom died, and I never thought that would be a subject that I would be known for. But by me just sharing my grief experience on Facebook, those were the posts that people talked to me a lot on, you know, and they made comments because people understood or were dealing with grief, so they felt what I was feeling, you know. And so if you can find a subject that your followers feel the same way you feel, then you can have some good conversations, you know, and your feed is constantly moving. And I think that's where people miss on social media. They get on social media thinking, oh, buy my book. But why should I buy my book? You know, talk about the internal fears. Talk about, you know, sitting on the couch and not writing when you I have lots of things for procrastination. I'm like, ooh, I could come up with a whole blog post about procrastination because I'm good at it.
Okay.
Oh, man. I have a question for you. So if you started your writing career again, what 3 things would you do differently?
Wow.
I think one of the most important things I probably would do differently is focus not so much just on the writing, but develop particular goals for each part of areas of writing. I'd say that because the first book I did was a novella, and after I did it, I was well pleased with the writing, but I didn't like the cover. So I think I would have studied more about the importance of, like, you know, finding the cover artist that draws the people into the book. The cover art. I think one of the other things that I would have done differently that I'm doing now is, like we talked about earlier, it's focused more on the business side, you know, because the writing is the easiest part, of focusing more on trying to utilize different types of marketing strategies, you know. I didn't really get into marketing heavily until now. So I think, and I was doing so much. Like I said before, I also written and produced 3 plays, and I was working with the 501 to produce those plays. I would have found more time to do the business, you know. And it's harder because plays are such a different animal. They're so much easier to sell than a book. So I thought one thing to do another thing, you know. So I think I would have focused more on the business aspect of the writing.
Those are good. I think that a lot of writers don't think about what is it they want from their writing. You know, we're so busy writing the books, but what do we want once the book gets out there? What do we want to do? Do we want to make $50,000? Are we okay with selling 2 or 3 books? I've met people that were okay with that. They were like, that's fine. I didn't come here to be a millionaire. And you have to know that because it's so frustrating. I work with frustrated writers. By the time they come to me, they're frustrated. And it's so hard to change a frustrated mindset because you realize that I can give you all kinds of stuff, but if your mindset is in the frustrated mode, you're not going to do anything because you're like, it's not going to work. You know, and so I think that with writers, we have to know what is it we want from our writing. Do we want to build a readership? Do we want to do speaking engagements? Do we want to do workshops? You know, those are things that you don't think about. When I put my book out, I never thought I was going to be a coach. That wasn't even on my agenda. I was just putting the book out. I wasn't worried about selling 1 million copies. I was putting a book out to help writers. That was my goal for that book, was to put a book out that hopefully will help writers promote their book. After I started learning more about the marketing side, I was realized, okay, I know promotion, but the marketing side is a whole different ballgame. You have to have more, you know, and so I had to realize that what else did I want to do with this book? You know, people, I need you to help me, and I'll pay you to help me. Oh, okay. Well, what if, you know, so now I got to sit down and write down what am I going to be sharing? How much do I want to charge, you know? You know, at first I was doing it for free. Oh, I'll do it for free, and I'm finding out that I'm sucking up all my time, you know. And so I had to realize you gotta set time you have to set a schedule, or you won't be writing. You'll be doing other things, you know. And there's so many things that come with writing a book and publishing it. You know, that nobody talks about that stuff to you, and then they're like, oh, yeah, girl, you need a marketing hat, you need a promotion hat, you need a training hat, you need a speaker hat, because people want you to come and talk to them. Once they find out if you published your book, then they want to talk to you about publishing stuff. As soon as my book hit Amazon, I got 5 DMs. Well, what did you do? Can you tell me? Like, oh. You know, so I sat down and wrote a little thing out. You know, that was stuff that nobody told me about. Nobody told me that people were going to be DMing me, want to know how I did it. What you do?
You know, let me tell you a story. So after my first book, I published it in November. So of course it's Christmas time, right? Mm-hmm. It's time to buy Christmas gifts. I took that money, I bought Christmas gifts. I was just living it up, you know. I should have been reinvesting that money into marketing, just everything that I needed to do to build up my business, but I wasn't looking at it from a business standpoint at all. Mm-hmm. And nobody told me. Even the lady who coached me, she didn't tell me that. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I'm just thinking that the money is just going to keep rolling in. No. No.
Yeah, then you wake up.
It takes work. And, you know, and I just spent my money, you know, buying gifts. So,
my goal was to sell enough
focus more on the business aspect.
Yeah, the business side is hard. When I put the book out, my goal was to make enough to pay for the next editing. That did not happen. Not the way I thought it was going to happen. And like you, I took that first check and splurged when I supposed to have been putting it over to the side to edit.
Right. Nobody said that. Nobody told me.
Like, I was tripping. What?
Yes.
Because once it dies down, you're like, okay, I only sold 2 books today. That's not going to buy any editing. So.
Yeah, like, hold on now. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See,
so definitely,
that's why I like to
do
the chat. Yeah, that's why I like to do the chat, because I want to show the real writer's world. You know, people talk about the good side, show the bad side too. Show the side that you should have known beforehand, and hopefully, you know, when I ask about what would you change differently, that helps somebody else, so they're like, okay, let me put this down, you know, right? And hopefully people are taking notes and they're like, yeah, let me think about that. You know, when I work with my clients, that's the first question I ask: what is it that you want from your book? You know, because when I think of books, when I first started, I wanted the New York bestsellers list. I had not a clue. So, you know, I've learned that it takes tens and thousands of readers to get to that. Yeah. I had 200 on my list. That was not going to get me to the New York bestseller list. But I knew that. Now, if you come out and you don't know that, you come out and I heard people, I'm going to sell 5,000 books. Okay, do you have 5,000 people that you can get in front of right now? Do you have an email list? And the first statement is no. Then I'm like, okay, we got work to do. You know, because you got to know people for them to buy your book. People got to know you for them to buy your book. You can't come out thinking you're going to sell 5,000 books when you don't have an email list, you don't have a platform, you have nothing but you. You got to work your tail off to do that. What are you going to do? Are you going to do workshops? Are you going to go to conferences? Are you going to go to readers' events? Are you going to be on television? Are you going to be on the radio, podcast? People don't realize that when you say how much you want to sell, how much work you're going to do to get to that point. You know, putting it on Amazon is not going to happen. If that was the case, we'd all be rich and be eating bonbons now.
You know, I've taken Brian Cohen, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Mm-hmm. He's done these 5-day Amazon ad profit challenges over 3 times this year. I just did the 3rd one. We finished up yesterday, I think. But he teaches you how to do Amazon ads if you've never done it. I mean, if he does it again, it's a great course a day. It's 5 days. And, you know, I'm that's one of the things that I'm doing differently. I'm running the Amazon ads, and it's working.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things I'm working. I'm trying to get that to really work for me in a way that I need it to work, because I can't get in front of people the way I used to, because I used to go out to different local events around here to sell my book, conferences and book fairs, but I can't do that now. So that's my next best thing, learning these Amazon ads.
And I go ahead, Ro.
I was going to say, I think for authors, COVID has changed the way we look at marketing, and it's given us, I don't know, well, for me, it forced me to learn how to do so much more electronically than I had to do before, because my books did really well with me going to, like, book events, all these in-person things. I was doing very well, and then all of a sudden COVID hit. It was like I had all these things lined up on my calendar in March, and they were all calling, telling me, I'm afraid we have to cancel this. And it was almost like these little doors that were shutting, and then I'm sitting there with all the doors shut thinking like, oh, wow, now what am I going to do? And now here I am sitting in this room with my computer and realizing I had to learn how to do all those things that you sell a book electronically. So it's just a different mindset.
Yeah, you definitely had to pivot during COVID. And if you didn't pivot, you found yourself falling down into that hole of, oh, my God, what am I going to do? I do recommend that ads class. I took the class, and I do recommend you having at least 5 books, 3 to 5 books. I only had 1, so you really can't see much with 1. But if you got 3 to 5 books, you can see how those ads help you. But I think it also works for people who are self-published. If you're published, I don't think it works for you, because you have to get behind the scenes with your information. You have to have new ideas when it comes to promoting. You always constantly have at least one new idea that you're doing, for the month, because if you're continually doing the same thing, you're continually talking to the same people. So my goal always is to reach new people. How can I reach new people? So I do the virtual events, because that's how I reach new people. Even if it's 5 people that signed up for it, there's 5 new people that I've met. I've found that when I don't do anything, I just talk to the same people. I try different platforms, and they're like, oh, LaShaunda, not another platform. But that's where you reach new people. If you're just doing Facebook, the only way that you reach new people are you're getting new followers every day on Facebook. If not, you're talking to the same people. I got 5,000 people on my Facebook page. It can't get any more on my personal page. My fan page, you can get as many people as you like. But they make the algorithm so hard on your fan page that people don't talk to you more than they do on your personal page. And so I try different places, and you go research and look at it. If I'm about fun. If it's not fun, I'm moving on, because if it's hard work, I'm not going to try it. I didn't get on Instagram when it first started, because I was not a picture person. I'm not taking 55 million selfies, because that's what I thought it was about. But one of my friends was like, LaShaunda, you into book promotion queen. Why aren't you on Instagram? And I was like, what? And she's like, it's a whole book community on Instagram. So I took a class. If you don't understand a platform, take a class. So I took a class on and found out that there was a huge book community on there. Reviewers, librarians, talking about books. And it was all about the hashtags. If you can find the hashtags, the right hashtags, you can find your community on Instagram. And so I got on Instagram, and I love it. I actually have 3 pages on Instagram now. But, you have to find stuff that you like to do, because then you'll do it. And you have to find stuff, get your schedule or limit your time on her so you don't get sucked up in it. But your goal as a writer is to find readers. Where are they? What are they doing now that COVID has closed all the events? Where are they hanging out at? You know, some people are on Instagram, some people are on TikTok. I got on TikTok. I'm still working TikTok, trying to figure it out, but I love TikTok. People be like, what? I get on TikTok. That's my last 15 minutes before the evening is up. I'm laughing at these people getting their dance on. I'm getting recipes. I learned how to make an omelet in a bag. I learned how to do 5 cakes in one cake. It's so much stuff to learn. When I get on, most of the time, that's what I love about the social media platforms is the stuff that you can learn on here. Even on Facebook, you learn something new every day from somebody. Somebody sharing something that you don't know. You know, you could be that person that's sharing something that somebody don't know. They come back and go, girl, I didn't know that. Thank you. So, you know, it's all about, you know, ask yourself every day, did I reach a new person today? And if you didn't, then you got a little bit more time to go reach a new person today so they know who you are, what your book is about, how to get it. You know, maybe when I started the podcast about grief, and someone contacted me and told me that she shared it with her friend. And that just blessed my heart because I was like, she's dealing with grief right now, and I thought that would be perfect for her. And I was like, wow. You know, she wasn't listening to it, but she shared it with her friend. And so that's the whole thing about books. You share them with people when it's so wonderful. You find something that you like. And most readers find out about books from somebody else most times. You know, if it's me promoting it on Facebook, they're like, oh, LaShaunda, this sounds good. I had somebody say, oh, that cover is beautiful. You know, let me go check it out. But it's because somebody shared it. And so that's what social media is about, sharing stuff, you know, and meeting new people. And you know, right now we're stuck in the house. So how are you meeting new people? If you haven't met anybody new this month, get on your job. All right, ladies, can you tell us how we can reach you online?
Sure. Well, we just talked about Facebook. You can go to Roe Braddy Productions. That's R-O-E, Braddy, B-R-A-D-D-Y, Productions. I have my books listed there. And, of course, Amazon.com. It's Barnes & Noble. They're actually at Target.com, Walmart.com. There's a bookstore in Los Angeles called the Rip Bodice. They're there. So they're in several different bookstores. Or you can contact me. You can inbox me if you'd like to buy a book personally from me. And I also have a website, RoeBraddy'sProductions.com.
Great.
Sorry. My website is NatashaFrazier.com. You can always find me there. I'm on Facebook, author Natasha Frazier, and the same thing for Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for sharing with us tonight. I hope this was helpful for you who are listening in. I want to thank our sponsor, Tickle My Tummy by Ann Clay. Laughing not only lightens your spirit, but it also lengthens your life. Tickle My Tummy delights in the small, easy-to-laugh-at, hilarious, and sometimes ridiculous things people do and say. Stories of family, relationships, work, and yes, church sets the pace for a few moments of enjoyment. This collection is broken down into Love is in the Air, Family Feud, Going to Church, Women Rule, The Things Kids Say, Just Plain Old Stupid, and It's a Pet Thing. These delightful snippets will definitely add bubbles to your day. Get ready to laugh out loud at some of the most commonplace stories of ordinary people, relationships, situations, and living the best life. I highly recommend this book if you need some laughter in your life today. Check the show notes for the link to order your copy. I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking time to listen to the podcast. I have my usual 3 questions for you. Did you enjoy this episode? If you did, subscribe to the platform you're listening to so you don't miss an episode. Number 2, what did you think of the episode? Tell us by writing a review on the platform you're listening to or send to onesormag@gmail.com. Did you learn something from this episode? If you did, please share the podcast with your community. If you have a topic or would like to be a guest or sponsor for an episode, contact me at onesormag@gmail.com. One last question. Have you promoted your book or business today? If you haven't, go showcase those wings. Someone needs what you have to offer. This is LaShaunda Hoffman, and I will see you on the next.